Growing up in a small forgotten town in the early 2000s, nestled between sprawling forests and winding rivers, had its downfalls. At 17, with nothing better to do, the thrill of exploring abandoned places with my friends became our weekend ritual. My friend, who I'll call Mark for the sake of the story, was super into finding abandoned places for us to explore. Mark's latest find was an old abandoned house about a mile down a dirt road in a patch of forest. He was visibly giddy telling us at school, and my friend Ryan and I agreed to go the next night. My first thought after seeing the house was how on earth Mark even found this place. We had driven for what seemed like forever down a windy dirt road with no sign of civilization in sight. The house itself was tucked in between a group of trees that was easy to miss if you were just driving by. "Are you sure this place is abandoned?" Ryan asked. "Yeah, just look at it." He was right. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years, with boards on the windows and plants growing on the walls and front porch. We got out of the car and followed Mark around the back of the house. It was eerily quiet, the only audible sounds being the crickets and the sound of our footsteps. There was a broken window around the back, with a single board across the frame. Mark pulled the board off with ease, creating a hole wide enough for each of us to fit through. Mark went first, followed by me, with Ryan bringing up the rear. Carefully avoiding the broken glass, we stepped inside the dark room. We shined our flashlights around, revealing a room void of furniture besides a single wooden chair in the corner. The walls were plastered with this old, tacky yellow wallpaper that was faded and peeling in many places. We continued exploring the ground floor, which was empty of furniture, but not graffiti or tagged, likely meaning we were the first to explore this house. We reached the front door of the house, which led into a dilapidated kitchen and a staircase. I glanced up the staircase with my flashlight pointed in the direction of the kitchen when I saw something that sent a shiver down my spine. A dark figure stood at the top of the stairway, looming down at me. I screamed, "Oh shit," and whipped my flashlight up the stairs, only to see a small hand as the figure disappeared out of sight. I stood there for a moment, frozen in fear and questioning reality as my two friends asked, "What happened?" "Did you guys see that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "See what?" Ryan replied, his tone skeptical. "There was someone, or something, at the top of the stairs." Mark chuckled. "You're messing with us, right? Come on, there's nothing here." But the image was seared into my mind, and I couldn't shake off the chill that ran down my spine. "I'm not joking, I saw something." Ryan rolled his eyes. "There's nothing, man, come on, let's go up." I've always been the least ballsy of the group, and I was truly terrified. I said no way, I'm getting the hell out of here, and started walking towards the broken window to leave. They both shouted obscenities at me, trying to get me to stay, but I didn't care. The image of the figure was still burned into my mind. Back at the car, I tried to convince myself I'd imagined the figure, but the fear lingered. After what felt like an eternity, Mark and Ryan emerged from the house, running, their faces pale, eyes wide with shock. Mark quickly opened the car door, started the engine, and sped off as fast as he could back down the windy dirt road, all the while me asking what happened. When we got to the main road, Mark pulled over to the side and looked over at me. His face was ghostly white as he told the story of what happened. The two had walked up the stairs and into what they thought was a small bedroom. They found old tattered clothes, a couple of half-burnt candles, and a woman's ID. They were both freaked out by the ID, but continued searching the upstairs until they found a locked door. Ryan said they at first thought it was just stuck, so they both pushed hard against it, but suddenly heard loud banging and screaming from the other side of the door. The two fell backwards in fear and ran down the steps and out of the house. They described the screams as demonic and inhuman, something that shook me. However, the thing that shook me the most was the figure I saw, which wasn't a giant looming figure. It was short and almost innocent looking, with something that strangely looked like a child's toy draped to its side. To this day, I'm not sure what to think about this experience. Mark and Ryan didn't like talking about it, and we lost contact after going our separate ways. I don't like to think about that night, but the figure comes back to me in my thoughts. What was a child doing in a run-down, empty house? Who or what was screaming? It still bothers me writing this today. I'm going to tell you the story of the only time I truly feared for my life. I have been an avid hiker for many years, as my father and I used to frequently visit the California national parks. I know it's dangerous, but I love to hike alone. There's something about being able to get away from the hustle and bustle of daily life and clear your head in nature. Having hiked alone many times with no issues, I expected the same from the hour-long climb to the top of Mount Cobb, where I was going to watch the sunset. It was winter at the time, so the sun set around 5:30. I started the hike around 4, bringing a small backpack to carry some gear. My father always drilled the importance of protecting myself against wildlife. It is black bear country, so I brought a container of bear spray just in case. I also brought a small pocket knife, a small handheld radio, and a flashlight, fully expecting to finish the hike in the dark after I watched the sunset. I got to the top with no issues and sat down to watch the sunset on a rock that overlooked a valley of dense forest. I noticed a man sitting on another rock a few hundred feet away, staring off into the distant sunset. He seemed like the average hiker, but I thought it was strange that he had no backpack or any gear with him. I shrugged it off until I noticed him turn and look at me with a blank expression. I smiled and nodded to him, only for him to slowly turn back towards the valley with the same blank expression. Feeling uncomfortable, I got up and continued a little ways up the trail until I was out of sight of the man. I watched the last of the sunset and started my descent, wanting to conserve the little daylight I had left before total darkness. I passed the spot where I saw the man earlier to find it empty. I was relieved, thinking that he had most likely already left. Just 5 minutes later, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around and my heart sank into my stomach. The same man stood 50 feet back, quickly walking down the trail towards me. How on earth did this guy get behind me? This trail was relatively open, so a person would have had to deliberately hide or walk deep into the tree line to not be seen. Both possibilities unsettled me. I decided to stop and move to the side and let him pass, pretending to look at my phone, only for the man to now stop too. I started to walk again down the trail, shortly followed by the noise of the man continuing too. More minutes passed of the same, with the day slowly fading into darkness. I was truly freaked out by the thought of having to navigate the trail in the dark while being followed by this guy. I decided to try and stop one more time to let this man pass. This time, however, instead of stopping, the man charged. He looked deranged, with his hands flailing about his sides, racing towards me with speed. Terror coursing through me, I ran off the trail and towards the tree line. I didn't look back as I ran through the trees, but I could hear footsteps behind me. Thankfully, I was faster than him, and the daylight was nearly all gone. With an increased distance between me and the man, and darkness blocking his vision, I stopped behind a large tree, awkwardly slamming my backpack against it in an attempt to hide. I could hear leaves crunching on the other side of the tree, as if the man was pacing. I held my breath, trying to be as silent as possible. 1 long minute later, I started to hear footsteps move in the opposite direction. I breathed a sigh of relief and waited for a while before reaching into my backpack to grab my flashlight. As I was getting ready to walk back towards the trail, something shattered the silence. My radio went off, emitting a low frequency that would have been audible for miles. Not wanting to stick around with my location revealed, I booked it back towards the trail, sprinting down the mountain using only the light from my flashlight. I didn't even stop to listen or look behind me as I ran. I finally reached the car and threw the ignition, hightailing it out of sight of the trail. There was something so surreal about what I just experienced that I burst into laughter as I drove, likely a coping method my brain was using. Looking back on it now, I think when I bumped into the tree, it switched the radio on. However, catching a random frequency at that very moment was incredibly unlucky. This is still the scariest experience of my life, and I am very fortunate to have been able to navigate the trail in the dark so fast. When I was in college, I used to make frequent cross-country drives from Los Angeles to New York to visit my girlfriend on holidays. During one particular Christmas break, I was in a serious rush to reach New York, as I had to stay later on campus for a final. I usually took the Interstate 80 because it was the fastest and easiest drive. The first 10 hours of the drive seemed to fly by, mostly because I had found an audiobook that I really enjoyed. However, by the 12th or 13th hour, the mental exhaustion was kicking in. I had just taken my last final at 7 in the morning, which had already exhausted my brain before getting on the road. Feeling my eyes getting droopy, I decided that I needed to stop soon. I wasn't fond of sleeping in the car, especially since my car door locks were occasionally faulty, so I decided to find a cheap motel. Being the typical broke college student, I looked for price over quality, something which I would come to regret. I found a local run motel for $60 a night, which seemed safe enough in a quiet town near the border of Utah and Colorado. The parking lot was deserted, and the small, dimly lit lobby was the same. I had to ring the bell multiple times before an older woman came out from the back room and gave me a room. Maybe I was just tired, but the hotel didn't seem run down, just old. I got to my door and unlocked it. I was greeted by a typical small motel room with all the basic amenities. Exhausted, I brushed my teeth and collapsed into bed. I'm a pretty light sleeper, so when I heard something crash to the floor, I awoke with a start. I sat up and flicked on the lamp, wiping the crust from my eyes as I glanced around the room. I didn't see anything on the floor that could have made that noise. I'm one of those people who can't sleep unless they've checked every part of the room after waking up to something strange. I got up and walked towards the bathroom. Nothing. I looked behind the shower curtains, and even in the cabinet, which was too small to fit anything significant. Nothing could have made that noise. Starting to think I maybe dreamed it, the only place left to check was the closet. I slowly walked towards the door and approached the handle. I turned it and swiftly pulled the door open. I gasped in horror. Illuminated from my bedside lamp was a middle-aged woman with long, dark hair that covered the sides of her face, looking down at the floor. I stepped back in fear as the woman shot her head up, giving me a creepy smile. She definitely looked like she was on some sort of hard drugs and wasn't in the right mental state. She slowly lifted her finger to her lips, as if to shush me as I slowly backed away. Then, she stepped out, turned, and walked straight out of the room's front door. Shaking myself out of a frozen trance, I ran to relock it behind her. Still baffled and in shock of what just happened, I quickly packed up my things and checked out of the motel, letting the woman know at the front desk what just occurred. I decided to continue my trip, as I had slept a few good hours and was still on edge. Luckily, I made it to New York without any further experiences.